Today, I want to talk about something that's really critical. And as Dina pointed out, whether you're a nonprofit or for profit doesn't matter. In fact, if you're married, you could probably use these strategies. But here's what's interesting. What I'm going to present to you isn't opinion or anecdotes or stories. It's based on data. So let's get into the presentation. And I will do two things. I told Dina she can go ahead, record the event, the session, and share it with you. And then I will send a copy of the presentation. I'll send it in PDF form. And so you can have the slides as well. So if you think you're missing something, you won't miss anything. I'm also going to give you a copy of my books. I'll send those in PDF. So you'll have all the content you need, more than enough. All right, let's get into this presentation and we'll take questions at the end. I told Dina I love tough questions. So give me tough questions at the end. That's what I'm looking for. All right, there it is. If you don't know who I am, look how cool that stage is. I always like that picture. Here's my background. I started out in engineering, became an application engineer. I met Mead somewhere in there when I became an application engineer in that space. By the way, I worked indirectly with Mead, and I think we reconnected, I should say, for the first time through CELA. So I started out in engineering, moved into sales. You can see my experience there. And eventually I decided to become a speaker, sales trainer. So I didn't read books. I learned sales first, and then I talk about sales. So I love the real world stuff. Let's get into it. Let me tell you a story first. This is a sales evolution story. So in 2011, a company called CEB basically studied, calls, and they looked at different attributes to find what the best of the best salespeople do. This is 2011. Now, here's what's interesting. They were the first company to say, there's 5 modalities, profiles of salespeople. One is the challenger, as you can see there. A challenger has a different view of the world, understands people, and likes to push the customer, right? Relationship builder, kind of obvious. The problem solver, this salesperson likes to solve problems. There's the hard worker, always working hard, in the grind. And then there's the lone wolf. Do you know a lone wolf? A lone wolf is one of these salespeople that doesn't listen to anybody. Just leave me alone. I'll do it my way. Leave me alone, right? If you know somebody like that, hit 1. Put a 1 in the chat. I just put a 1. I know somebody like that. Now, let me ask you a question. I need you to look at this, and we're all a little bit of all of them. We all have a little bit of all these 5 profiles, but you have one dominant mode. You have one dominant style. Which one do you think you have as a salesperson? And even if you're not a salesperson, as a communicator, which one do you think is your dominant style? Is it challenger? Put a C. Relationship builder, put an R. Problem solver, put a P. Hard worker, give me the HW. And if you're a lone wolf, which I love, put the LW in there. Come on, everybody's got to vote on this one. I got to vote on this one. Okay, everybody's got to get in there. I don't see. Okay, we got half of the folks in there. Come on, people, come on. Let's make this as interactive as possible so we can make it as fun as possible. All right, now here's what the data showed. We all have all 5, and then they asked 2 fundamental questions. In a simple or complex sale, which profile do you think did the best? In a simple or complex sale, which profile do you think did the best? Okay, just think about that. Kind of make a mental note of it. Whether the economy was bad down here or good up here, which profile do you think did the best? Make a note. Okay, so again, simple or complex, which profile did the best? In a good economy or bad economy, didn't matter, which profile did the best? Now, the majority of people are going to say relationship, but what they found that there wasn't relationship. It was actually the challenger. The challenger did the best. Of all the profiles, the challenger did the best. And I'm going to explain in detail why this is true. But when this first came out, people were like, how could it be? How could it be? Because what they also found is there's one profile that did the worst when it came to a simple or complex sale. Whether the economy was good or bad, there was one profile that did the worst. Which one do you think it is? Which profile do you think did the worst, whether it was simple, complex, right? Good economy, bad economy. And what they found is the relationship builder did the worst. Now, this shocked a lot of people because we were taught it's all about relationships. But here's the subtlety. Customers today don't want a relationship. Now, I'm not saying, be mean to people or potential clients. No, again, we have a little bit of all 5, but customers want a challenger, someone to help them make a buying decision. Now, after they make the buying decision, they want you to also be a relationship builder. But what customers want today is a challenger. So the story continues. So what do challengers do? Challengers do three things. Here's a Venn diagram of what they do. They teach for differentiation. They help the customer say, this is why this is different. This is how this will benefit you, and it differs from the competition. They also tailor for resonance. Now, this is important. Here's why. Tailor for resonance means there's a phrase in sales, and I'll say it slowly. It says, eye level is buy level. Eye level is buy level. And what that means that if you're here talking to and the customer's here, when your eyes are aligned, you buy. What does that mean to you? That we always have to speak in our customer's language. In other words, if we speak and make it too complicated, we're not speaking at eye level with the client. So we have to simplify our language. If the client doesn't know enough, we have to take time to educate them. And again, make sure that we're at eye level, talking to each other at the same level. And the third thing they do is they take control of the conversation. Now, this again shocked a lot of people. Take control of conversation. Most people say, well, wait a minute, we should really listen to our customers. We should really, follow them in terms of what they want. But what they found is that you need to take control of the conversation. And I'm going to show you how you do that without offending clients. So again, this study came out in 2011. Let's keep the story going. So in 2016, I fly out to Seoul, Korea to do a presentation for Cigna, right? And I finished the presentation, and the vice president of the region, his name was Ben Hong. Ben Hong says to me, Victor, would you like to see our call center? This is Cigna Health Company, right? Health insurance company. He says, would you like to see our call center? To which I said, why not, right? So we go downstairs and to another level, and I see his call center, and it looks something like this, right? And so I'm talking to Ben. I said, Ben, on average, how many calls do these people have to, field? In other words, they're trying to sell health products, right? Healthcare products, right? I said, well, on average, they deal with about 100 calls per day. So I said, if they close 20% of the 100%, that means out of 100 calls, they closed 20, they got 80 left. How do they know who to call back? Like, how do they know who's called to return? I asked them these three questions. How do they know who to call back? How do they know who isn't going to buy? So let's not waste our time. Or the last one is like, well, who deserves a follow-up? In other words, they're not ready to buy today, but maybe they'll buy in the future. Like, how do they make those decisions? I thought he was going to say, well, Victor, it's all about what they say, how they say it, when they say it, gut instinct, and all those things. He didn't say that. He said, Victor, we use natural language processing, which is a subset of AI. And I said, what? Now, let me just pause here for a moment. When I graduated from college in 86, my first job in 87 was working for Honeywell, the Undersea Systems Division. It's in that system, in that company, we developed torpedoes. If you saw the movie The Hunt for Red October with Sean Connery, that was a Mach 46 torpedo. I was part of the team that worked on the Mach 50 torpedo that had, in short, AI expert systems. So I've been knowing about AI since 86 and 87. So when I heard this, my ears just perked up like, you're using AI? Because I had not heard about AI for a while. He says, yes, Victor, here's what we do. What we do is we record the calls. We listen for tone and inflection, speech velocity, how fast they're talking, the customer, is there stress in their voice? What key words are they using, right? What questions are they asking the customer? What key phrases are they saying? And my favorite one is competition. Now, let me ask you a question. Here's a test. It's a test. If you're having a conversation with a client, potential client, and they mention competition early, is that good or bad? Just put G for good, B for bad in there. If they mention competition early, in other words, they tell you about the competitor, like we're already working with, we're thinking of buying from. If they mention the competitor early, is that good or bad? What do you think? All right. If you said good, good, because that's exactly it. What they found in the data is that when a competition is mentioned early, what the customer is signaling to you is, I'll mention a competitor, but I'm not sure I want to go with them, which is why you're here and I'm listening to you. Now, if they mention it late in the conversation, that means they listen to your presentation And when they mention a competitor late, it's because they're going to buy from them. Again, this is not my opinion. It's what the data was showing. And by using this, by analyzing not only the analog part, the voice, inflections, but transcribing it and analyzing the words, they were able to boost their sales by 37%. Now think about this. In my mind, my head went poof. It exploded like AI is back, right? Since 2016. Now, that's when I decided to go back into the lab and I wrote this book called Sales Ex Machina or Machina. And it means sales from the machine. And I envisioned in 2017, and we published it in 2018. In 2017, when I was writing it, I envisioned that the data from the machine will drive our sales, right? And subtitle is How AI is Transforming the World of Selling. I already saw it. Now, to put this in context, I wrote this book 5 years before anybody knew or ChatGPT was launched, 5 years before ChatGPT. And when I launched the book, I barely sold any copies because people are going, AI, what is that? Like today we use the word algorithm like it's, candy, like it's nothing. But 5, 6, 7 years ago, you didn't hear the word algorithm, deep learning, large language models. This is new language we're developing. So when I wrote this book, and I wrote it with Dr. James Anderson, who was my mentor at Honeywell, as we got together, wrote this book, we were really excited. The story continues. By the way, I wrote a new book, that one right there, called The Future of Selling. This one I launched in March. It talks about the rise of AI agents and agentic flow. Again, it hasn't sold a lot of copies because a lot of people haven't figured out what's coming in 26 and 27. If you want to get a head start, that's the book. So I will send the PDF files to Dina, and then she will forward the copies on to you along with this presentation. But let me get back to my story. Now, 2020, the pandemic hits, right? Everybody goes inside, and now something interesting. Before I make my point here, let me ask you a question. If I were to ask you, let's say you had a 2-hour conversation with a potential client, right? Potential buyer. You had a 2-hour conversation. What percentage of that conversation that you had with that client, so let's say Mead's my potential client, I'm talking to Mead for 2 hours trying to sell them on a system, right? 2 hours of conversation. What percentage of that conversation do you think makes it into a CRM, a customer relationship management system? In other words, how much of that call after I talk 2 hours with Mead makes it into the actual CRM? What would you guess? Put a number there. What would you guess? I'm gonna wait for some guesses here. What would you guess? Okay, so now if you guessed around 3 to 4%, you would be absolutely correct. What they found is that we can have a 2-hour conversation, but less than 3 to 4%, less than 5% of that conversation makes it into the CRM, which means that the majority of that data is lost, right? We lose it. There's a point here because when the pandemic hit, or pre-pandemic, the data in the CRM wasn't reliable. The pandemic hits, we all go inside. We all start doing remote conferences. Everybody starts jumping on these systems, right? You think about it, 5, 6 years ago, most of us didn't know what Zoom was. People thought Zoom, what, get closer? No, virtual platform, right? We didn't know. Now we jump on Zoom like it's no big deal. So now all these people, all of us are jumping on Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, whatever it may be. And now, which means these calls are recorded. So along comes a company in 2022, Tether. Tether says, hey, there's a lot of these things are being recorded now, deals that are being closed virtually. Let's analyze them. But look, they analyzed 2.5 billion sales calls. They looked at over 8,000 attributes. In other words, what people were doing to figure out what the best of the best do. Go back to the top, look at CEB, and then look 11 years later, how much more data we have now. So what I want to present to you is what they found. And what they found is what the best of the best do. And they do 5 things. And if you do these 5 things, you'll become a better salesperson. And again, if you're in the nonprofit space, remember, it is sales, but it's really about just getting people to understand what we're trying to do. Again, in a sense, it is sales, but selling value. So let's get into what they found. Here's the high level part that really shocked everybody. Did you know that if you did a cross-sectional study of different industries, the average close rate is 40%, which means that if you win 40, you're going to what? Lose 60. Not hard here, right? Now, here's the question. Put it in the chat. What happened to that 60%? Where did it go? Put it in the chat. What happened to that 60%? Where did it go? Where did that 60% go? And what they found was interesting. Only 20% went to your competitor, but the other 40% made no decision. 20% went to your competitor, 40% made no decision. What does this tell you? There's something implied, implicit in the data, and that is that your real competition is not your competition. Your real competition is indecision, the no decision. Think about it. 40% don't buy or ever buy, right? And so that means too often we focus on our competitors. What are our competitors doing? But if you look at this data and you believe this, the real information here is that you're losing business to no decision, not to your customers. So what we're going to solve today is, how do you get customers to make a decision? How do you get them to move forward? And here are the 5 things. Before I get into that, sorry, there's 2 types of no decisions. I want to clarify this. We've been taught about status quo indecision. Status quo indecision is, I don't feel a sense of urgency. I don't need to do this now. Okay. So that is a form of not making a decision. So we were taught, create the urgency. You're going to lose market share. You're losing revenue. Your costs are out of hand. You really need to do this. You try to create this sense of urgency. You're losing customers. Retention is low, so forth and so on. But what the data shows is most people already understand that they have to do something. You don't need to create urgency. They know they need to do something in a hyper-competitive market. The other one is this one, indecision. And the problem here is that they're afraid to make a buying decision. So they make no decision. So I want you to know that there's a difference here. Again, most of us were trained, I shouldn't say that, that's too assumptive. Some of us were trained on create a sense of urgency, create the pain, and then sell them the gain. I am saying to you, you still have to create a sense of urgency, but that isn't enough anymore. That gets them past status quo. Once they know they have to make a decision, in other words, okay, I get it, I have to do something. Then you shift your tactic from pain to now, how do you help them make a buying decision? And how do you reduce their anxiety? And this is key. How do you reduce their anxiety? I always look at sales as 2 things. There's 2 levers in sales now. There's certainty and anxiety. Certainty and anxiety. Our job is to increase their certainty that it's a good decision, reduce the anxiety that it's not going to go wrong. And the difference between certainty and anxiety is the confidence margin. So our job is to give them the confidence to make a buying decision. How do you do that? 5 ways to do that. The first one, here's what the data shows. And again, what I'm showing you now is not my opinion, it's what the data shows. The data shows that we should own and control the flow of a conversation. Now, I'll give you an example of controlling a conversation. I've showed this before. This is a fun example. I have a mailbox, right? A UPS mailbox.
I have more.
Okay. All right. So I have this mailbox over at the UPS store, and my contract was up. So I had to renew the contract. So Sally says to me, say, Victor, your contract's up. You need to renew it for the next year. Now, I was paying $220, you know what I mean, for that mailbox, right? Now, in my mind, I'm like, that's a lot of money. I go, how much are the small ones? And she said, $160. Now, the difference is $60, right? What is my brain thinking? I can save $60 because $60 is like, 12 lattes at Starbucks. That's real value to me. So my brain, like, have you ever dealt with a customer who they have the expensive one, but they keep looking at the cheap option? They keep looking at the least expensive. We've all done that, right? So she sees in my eyes that I'm leaning towards saving $60. And she goes, Victor, let me ask you a question. And I'm thinking, she's going to sell me. I can tell. I can see it in her eyes. She's going to sell me. But I know what she's going to say, because she's going to try to convince me to stay with the 220 mailbox. I know what she's going to say. Here's what she's going to say. Victor, you want to stay with the big one. Easy access, bigger is better. It's more convenient. You don't have to pick up your mail as often. Mailbox won't get jammed because it's bigger. Letters won't get crushed because it's not small. You got a bigger box. And last but not least, that bigger box can handle packages, right? I thought that's what she's going to say. That's not what she said. Here's what she did. She said, Victor, let me ask you a question. To which I said, what's your question? She goes, I understand that you want to save $60. I get that, right? He says, but have you thought about the fact that if you change mailbox, you'll have to change the address, which is really just the number of the box? I go, so what? She goes, but on top of that, do you have business cards? I said, yeah. You'll have to reprint those business cards. On top of that, Victor, is your address on your website? I go, yeah. Well, you'll have to update your website. I don't know if you do that or you have to hire somebody to do that. And on top of that, she goes, you'll have to update all your promotional materials unless you can do it yourself. I don't know how much time that's going to take. And last but not least, you have to contact all your clients to let them know that your address mailbox has changed. Last question, Victor, how much time and money is that going to cost you? What do you think I did? I said, renew the contract, right? Because in my mind, here's what she did. In my mind, I'm looking to save $60. But what she said to me through a series of questions is she made me aware, brought it top of mind, that I'd have to change my address, print business cards, edit my website, change my promotional materials, and contact my customers. I wasn't thinking that way, but through a series of questions, she got me to become aware of that. So that's controlling the flow of a conversation. Now, here's an adage, and it's a simple rule. The average salesperson, and we're all in sales. The average salesperson practices what to say. The superior salesperson practices what to ask. Because in asking, you can actually guide the conversation. So think about this in the future. It's okay. You got to know your products. You have to know the services and the value that you offer. I get that. But what questions are you going to ask the customer in your meetings, questions with an S, that would get them to go, I didn't look at it that way. I never thought about that. See, that's when you know you're having a real conversation. When you get them to think about things they're not thinking about. That is controlling the flow of the conversation. And look at the close rates. When you let the customer lead, close rates were 60%. When the seller leads, asking questions, look at the close rate, more than double. Okay, so that's the power of knowing what to ask, how to ask it, and sequencing what to ask. So again, keep this in mind. The average salesperson practices what to say. Anybody can talk. But the best of the best, the superior salespeople, know how to ask great questions to drive a conversation. Number two, my favorite topic. I taught this in CELA many times. The data proved what I already knew 10 years ago, that you never wait for an objection to be raised by the customer. You anticipate the objection and you block them. Let me say this slowly. And I have a book that I wrote around this called Response Block Selling. Here's the essence of the theory. If a customer raises an objection, your price is too high. That's more than I expected to pay. Right now, we don't have time to do that. Whatever the objections may be. If they raise the objection, you now have to defend yourself and try to overcome the objection, which is what we've been taught. All right. So, and when you're defending yourself, you're not winning a conversation. I know this for a fact. When I have to explain myself to my wife, I'm not winning that conversation. I'm telling you, I'm not, because I'm explaining myself, right? And I'm joking, but my point is, never wait for the customer to raise the objection. If you know what the objections are already, which I'm sure you do, if you know your product or your service or your value, you know what objections are going to be raised. So if I know what the objections are, here's the philosophy. If I raise the objection myself, then I control how I handle the objection. If the customer raises it, I have to defend myself, and that's never a winning position. But if I raise it and I can control it, then I'm in a better position. Let me give you an example. So this is the whole thing. My point is, overcoming objection is kind of old school, still valuable. You got to learn how to overcome unexpected objections. But the reality is, if you block objections, you will feel the resistance in a conversation go down. So here's the structure I invented. And I developed four in the book. And again, I'll send a copy of this book too. It's called Response Block Selling. And in the book, I have 23 examples of the 23 most common objections you'll get. And then I give you the scripts, which you can edit to fit your business, product, service, or value. So years ago, I was working for a software company. And I'll give you the short version of the story. I wasn't closing well. And I was told that, Victor, the problem is you're not raising the objections and controlling them. And one of the objections in the audience or in the group I was talking to was that in their mind, I go, that software looks complicated. So imagine you're trying to sell a software package and somebody in the audience is looking at that and going, that looks hard to use. It looks complicated. Now, do you wait for somebody to raise their hand and say, that looks complicated? No, I already told you, if they raise it, you have to defend it, and that's not a good position. So what I developed is this 4-step process to eliminate or subdue, I'll say, minimize an objection. So I know in the audience, the objection is software is too complicated, right? So here's how I raise the objection. I said, from the front of the room, if I'm in a group doing a presentation, I said, many of our clients initially thought the software was going to be tough to use for the average user, and that's understandable. So in other words, I'm saying it looks tough to use. Now, if you're in the audience and you hear this, you go, yeah, I was thinking the same thing too, right? So there's a bit of trust being built at the same time because you're raising an objection they had in their head. Number two, here's the offer. Do you mind if I show you a few things just to show you how easy it is to use? What do you think most people say? They go, yeah, sure, go ahead, right? So then I move to the demo, show and tell. I said, all right, let's say you want to do this. This is me demoing the software. I point, click, drag, drop, cut, paste, run this, run that, bam, show it to them, right? I demo how easy it is to use and maneuver. And then here's the critical part. I tie down the objection. What's the objection? It's too complicated. Here's how I tie it down. Based on what I've shown you, do you think with a little practice and our support, you could do it? And people go, yeah, I think I can, right? So all of a sudden, I had a close rate that was around 17, 18%, and my close rate went to about, I'll say 45 to 50% when I implemented this strategy. So how would you use this? Again, if you know the 3, 5, or 7, I call it the 357 rule, 3, 5, 7. There's no more than 3, 5, or 7 objections in a room. And if I know what the objections are, throughout my presentation, I can actually reduce the resistance by blocking them throughout the presentation. That's another workshop, but you get the idea. So when the data came out, these 2.5 million calls were analyzed, and they said, yes, anticipate the objections. I'm like, yes, I knew this already, but it's nice to know that the data now supports that if you anticipate, block the objections, you'll reduce resistance in the room that much quicker. Number 3, engagement style. There was a wonderful lady by the name of Kim Scott wrote a book called Radical Candor, and this is the best way to explain this. She said, look at the vertical axis. You're concerned about your client. At the bottom of the axis, you're only concerned about yourself, right? Narcissist, right? On the left side, you stay silent. On the other extreme, you basically challenge them, right? And here's what she said, and I thought was really fascinating. She said, if you're concerned about your clients, if you're a salesperson, be the salesperson for a second. If you're a salesperson and you're concerned about your client, and you know they're making a bad decision and you don't say anything, she called that ruinous empathy. In other words, you care, but you don't care enough to tell them they're not making a good decision. She said, if you stay silent, you don't say anything because you're thinking about yourself because you just want to make a commission, that's manipulative. That's not good either. And if you challenge people because you have a big ego, well, you're just obnoxious. She says, what you want to do is something called radical candor. Because if you cared about your clients, you'll challenge them when they're not making the right decision. Go back to my mailbox example. Sally was selling with radical candor. She said she saw me trying to save $60, and she's thinking, he's not thinking about this correctly. He is not really thinking about what the real cost is. Remember, $60 was the price. All the things I would have to do after that would be the cost. And she goes, Victor's focused on price. I need to move him over to cost, right? And that's what she did through a series of questions. And that's what radical candor is. And I say this because sales has a bad reputation. People think sales is about trying to take advantage of people, selling them things they don't want. That's not true sales. That's not what true sales is. The existence of sales is very simple. It's capitalism in its purest form. It is value for value. If I offer you value, here's a software that will help your business run more efficiently, increase your revenue, reduce your cost, expand your market share. If I can help you do that, it's okay if I make a little money. Absolutely. That's the value for value. If you really care about your clients, if you really cared about your clients and you know that that decision is very short term, it's not going to work long term, and you know what they're trying to do, then it's your fiduciary responsibility. It is your responsibility to say, let me ask you a couple of questions because I don't think you're thinking about this long term. That's radical candor. And I'll give you a specific example like on recommendations. You ever have a client ask you for, another referral or reference? That's part of like you're trying to get them to buy. They go, yeah, well, I'd like to talk to somebody else. Let me have another referral or another reference, right? So then radical candor is this. You say something like this. If this is what you need to go ahead, to give you the confidence to go ahead and move forward, I'm going to do that. But I'm also concerned that another call, which is going to be pretty similar to the one you've already done, isn't going to really address the concerns you have. If you could help me understand, in a sense, what you're concerned about, what's holding you back, let me know what the best way, and we can figure out what the best way is. Now, notice what happened in that moment. You're going, oh, let me have another reference. It says, one, notice the top part. I'd be more than happy to give you one. And then, but, which negates everything before that. But I don't think another call, there's something else going on. I can give you another phone number, another person to call, but there's something else going on. What is holding you back? And it's the ability to have, that is radical candor. It is the ability to stop and just say, let me ask you a question, because it doesn't seem to me that this product seems to align with what you want. It doesn't seem as a nonprofit, this is something that you feel would, make your money go, I guess, further, or something aligns with your values as a nonprofit. Can I ask why? Notice what I'm doing. I'm stopping. I'm being direct, polite, and I'm asking a question. That's what radical candor is. Now, number 4, we're almost getting to the end here. This would surprise me, but not really. It surprised me to the extreme of the difference in close rates, and that's advocacy mode. Advocacy mode is recommend something. And what they found was really interesting. When you see a client struggling, whether I should I invest, should I not in this charity, whatever it may be, right? They said, basically, when you see them struggling, stop asking questions at this point. So there's a point where you have to stop asking questions and start recommending. So for example, I'm trying to sell you a given training, right? Sales training that I do. And you're like, I don't know, Victor. I said, look, let's do this. I'm going to give you a couple of options, and then I'm going to tell you which one I think best fits your needs. I got A, B, C. Based on what you've told me, based on what you're trying to accomplish, this is the one I would recommend. All right. So what they found is that you moving into advocacy mode really is what the customer wants. Now, let me slow down even slower. What clients want from you today is your expertise. Got it. But what they also want is your recommendation. Imagine you going in to see a doctor. Let's, for example, pretend that I have a bad knee. I go in to see the knee surgeon, right? They take the x-rays, they do the MRIs, whatever it may be, right? Take the x-rays. Now, imagine the surgeon, the doctor coming back. He says, Victor, I looked at your knee. We need to do something with this knee. You can't go on like this. And he says the following to me. Now, we can come in from the right, we can come in from the left, or we can come in from the center through the kneecap. Which one would you prefer, Victor? What would I say? I go, I don't know. You're the expert. You tell me. Like, why would a surgeon ask me my opinion on how a procedure should be done? To some extent, we as salespeople do the same thing. We put 3 options on the table and tell the customer, you got 3 options. What do you think? That's not what they're looking for, because they're just confused and they need you. Remember what I said earlier, certainty, lower anxiety. The difference is a confidence margin. They need you to give them the confidence. So what you need to do is, based on what I've talked about, based on what you've said, based on your goals, based on what you're trying to do, based on your timeline, this right here would be the best option. And again, you can phrase it. We call it proactive nudging like this. This is what I would recommend. Here's what other customers in your situation have done, have chosen to do. Social proof, right? This is our most popular product. Now, by the way, by inserting the word popular as an adjective in front of product, you just said, this is our most popular product. What you're saying indirectly, everybody else is buying that, so it must be good, right? This is my favorite. Here's what you need to do, and here's why. Studies have shown that if I tell you, here's what you need to do, but then I add the because or the here's why, it gives it more weight. So back to the knee surgeon. Knee surgeon says, Vic, he says, we're going to come in from the left side. Here's why. I'm like, okay, why? And then he'll give me the reasoning, right? So again, what customers want from you is to give them a recommendation, and then here's why. Here's what I would recommend, and the reason why this is the best solution, or this is the best charity to invest in, or the best fund to invest in, whatever it may be. Okay. And by the way, look at the difference in closing rates. Reactive is you wait for the customer to decide. Proactive nudging is you say, here's what I would recommend. Here's what other people have chosen to do. Here's what other people have done, and here's why. 144% close rate difference because of the difference, right? Last one, de-risk. This one I kind of saw but didn't see coming. I didn't realize it was that important. De-risk, I'll go back to my why people buy. Certainty, anxiety. Increase certainty, reduce anxiety. Now I want to focus on reducing anxiety a little bit. De-risking is this. I've used the story in the past. There's a company, when Hyundai first landed in the US, the 1990s, it wasn't well known, right? Had a poor perception. Now, here's what's interesting. People weren't buying. What was the client's pain? Why weren't people buying? It turns out people weren't buying because they were worried about maintenance, right? That's why they weren't buying the car. It wasn't brand, it wasn't price, it wasn't it's new in the market, it's Korean, whatever. It wasn't any of that. It was, what if it breaks down? So who knows and can guess what Hyundai did? I'll give you the answer. How did they de-risk? How did they reduce the anxiety? How did they reduce the anxiety? Here's what they did. They offered a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty, right? So they reduced my anxiety. So in other words, remember, confidence, anxiety. By reducing my anxiety, they increased my confidence margin to make a decision. And everything was good. Sales go up. But then we had this little thing happen called the recession, 2007, 2009. Now, why weren't they buying? Had nothing to do with the maintenance anymore. Why weren't they buying? Well, the answer turns out they were afraid to lose their jobs. So what did Hyundai do to lower anxiety, de-risk the situation? What they did was they implemented a buyback program. If you lose your job, we'll take the car back. I mean, it doesn't get better than that in terms of reducing anxiety. So here are the results from this. After 1 year, less than 100 people actually used the program. Isn't that incredible? Less than 100 people actually used the program. When they ended the program, almost 2 years, less than 350 people used it. In other words, they didn't use it. It was really fascinating. Nobody used it. And then they looked at the numbers, and here's what they found. They went from 7,500 cars a month to double that. Almost double, right? Because again, you were able to reduce the anxiety. Now, there's different ways in your business, and I'll close out with this. We talked about warranty. That's one way of reducing anxiety. A buyback program, just talked about that. Another way of reducing anxiety. How about a shorter contract? I've had this before. Victor, I don't want to do a 6-month training contract with you. I said, well, how about let's just do a 3 month. And at the end of 3 months, we'll measure it again and decide to do another 3 months. How's that sound? Close rates like that, right? How about this one? Price drop guaranteed. If the price drops or you find something cheaper, I will match it. Okay, price drop guarantee. Price lock-in. Victor, I don't know. If I buy now, are you going to raise the price over time? No, I'm going to lock this price in for the next 3 years. Fair contract. He says, I don't know about 3 years. Give me 5, whatever it may be. You get the idea. Limited scope. This is always an interesting one. When you have a complex project that has a lot of moving pieces, what you should do is what we here in the US call chunking. Chunking means you break it up into chunks, right? And so in other words, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I still try to do the whole thing. I said, why don't we just start with phase 1? Let's see how phase 1 goes. And then from there, we can make another decision. So again, that's called limiting the scope of the contract. Or maybe if you're implementing a new software for a company, well, instead of doing it all departments, why don't we just start with this department first? Let's figure out what the requirements are going to be. Let's test it for 3 months, right? And then make a new decision. So there's different ways to de-risk. Skin in the game when you offer customers some like, I'm willing to put in this much if you put in that much. That's skin in the game, right? Completion guarantee. Again, if you're not satisfied with this, we will give you all your money back. That's it. All right. So there's different ways. You can come up for your own industry. You can come up with different ones. The last one to reduce anxiety, again, is to show them social proof. Let them talk to one of your customers. Let them read the case studies, get the testimonials. I've always used let them talk to our vice president or president. Mead knows this because one of our closing strategies was to customer to kind of commit was, I'm going to have my president of my division call you personally to give you the guarantee and the assurance that this does what it says it's going to do. And if it doesn't work, you will get your money back or we'll take the system back. And we used to do that and close more deals. So there are many ways you can de-risk it. So those are the 5 ways. 1, ask questions, control the flow. 2, anticipate the objections. You already know what the objections are going to be. It's a matter of blocking those objections, right? The third one, engagement. Don't be afraid when you hear a customer hesitate. Like, you ever ask a question and the customer goes, okay. Okay. Don't just keep going through the presentation. You stop, say, Dina, I said, I just asked you this question and you don't seem to be convinced. Can I ask why? In other words, when you hear hesitation, pause, shifting in the body, you stop and you ask a question, right? That's, again, engagement style. Don't be afraid to do that, because if you don't stop and ask that question and clarify to see what's holding them back after you leave, that's the very thing that's going to hold them back. So again, don't be afraid to do that. Advocacy, recommend something. Here's why. You should get that one. And the last one is de-risk, which we just talked about. And I want to close out with this slide, my favorite CEB slide. What are the drivers of customer loyalty? Here are the percentages. Company and brand impact. 2, product and service delivery. Value to price ratio. But the big boy here is the buying experience, right? That's the big one. This is what customers want today. You can have a better product, maybe just for a while. You can have a product differentiator just for a while because somebody will copy it. But what people are looking for is an experience, the buying experience, how you treated me as a client. So here's what they define as a buying experience. Offer me a unique and valuable perspective on the market. In other words, tell me something I didn't know, or tell me something that's about to happen. That's what I need from you, the salesperson, right? Help me navigate the alternatives. So many choices out there. So many choices. Help me navigate this advocated position, advocacy mode. Provide me ongoing advice and consultation. Guide me. Okay. And again, not all these have to apply to you, but you get the idea. Help me avoid making mistakes, stepping on a landmine, which means it's a mistake. Educate me on new issues and outcomes. This is what customers are looking for. So as you're thinking about this, remember, what customers want is help in making a buying decision. And your job is to ask the right questions, block those objections, again, engage them, advocate something, and then try to find ways to de-risk that conversation. And on that note, I thank you. Let's make growth happen in 2026.